You know, sometimes life teaches us the hardest lessons when we least expect them. And sometimes the people you think you can lean on are the very ones who let you fall. Hello, my name is Dorothy. I'm 72 years old. And before I tell you what happened to me, let me ask, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back to the moment when this story really began. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor by my hospital bed. The fluorescent lights above me hummed, the kind of sound you don't notice at first, but grows louder when you're lying awake and alone. I had just come out of surgery. Nothing too experimental, but serious enough that the doctors told me recovery would take time and I'd need help. And I thought, no, I knew my daughter would be that help. She's my only child, the person I gave my life to raising. The nurse had just left after checking my vitals. She was kind, but her shift was ending soon, and I dreaded the silence that would follow. So, I picked up the phone beside my bed, my hand still weak and trembling from anesthesia. My heart raced, not because of pain, but because I was about to hear my daughter's voice. That alone should have been comfort enough. She answered on the third ring. Yeah? She said. Her voice clipped, rushed, as if she'd been interrupted. I swallowed hard. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I just got out of surgery. I was wondering if you could come by this evening. Maybe help me with dinner. I don't think I'll manage to feed myself very well just yet. There was silence. Just the faint sound of typing in the background. Maybe her work, maybe her phone. Then a sigh. Mum, I'm busy. Call someone else to feed you. I don't have time for this right now. Her words weren't shouted. They weren't cruel in tone, but they were cold. So cold they cut deeper than any scalpel could. I froze, clutching the receiver tighter. Call. Someone else? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she said. Maybe a neighbor, or just order something. I can't drop everything for you every time, okay? I have my own life. I'll check in later. And with that, she hung up. The beeping of the monitor suddenly felt louder, the humming lights harsher. I stared at the phone, still holding it against my ear, even though the line was dead. Order something? Call someone else? I had just come out of surgery. My legs still felt like they belonged to someone else, and my body ached with every breath. The one person I thought I could rely on, the one person who should have been there, had told me I wasn't worth her time. I set the phone back down with shaking hands. My chest tightened. Not just from the surgery, but from something heavier, something hollow, the kind of emptiness only betrayal can leave. The nurse returned a few minutes later to adjust my blanket. She noticed the tears rolling down my face. Are you in pain, Mrs. Dorothy? She asked softly. Yes, I whispered. But it wasn't the kind of pain she could treat with medication. I tried to hide it, tried to brush it off. Just a little sore, that's all. But inside I was crumbling. I stared at the window beside my bed. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passing, people walking, children laughing in the distance. Life went on, uncaring of my little heartbreak. I asked myself over and over, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail her? I raised my daughter on my own after her father passed. I gave her everything. How could she abandon me like this, when all I needed was a simple meal and a bit of company? The nurse patted my hand gently, but she had other patients to tend to. Soon I was left alone again, the room swallowing me in silence. And in that silence, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. I prayed for strength, for a sign, for anything to remind me that I wasn't completely invisible. At that moment, I didn't know that the answer to that prayer was already on its way, wrapped in flowers and sealed with a note I would never forget. Lying in that hospital bed, with the sterile air pressing down on me and the echo of my daughter's words still rattling in my head, I couldn't help but drift back into the past. Memories have a way of creeping in during moments of silence. some warm, others sharp enough to reopen old wounds. When my husband died, my daughter was just 8 years old. I remember the day like it was yesterday, the knock on the door, the solemn faces, the way the world seemed to crumble in one swift motion. I was left with a child who looked up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, asking if Daddy would be home for dinner. I promised her we'd be okay, even though inside I was terrified. Back then, I worked at a small library during the day and cleaned offices at night. I remember dragging my body through double shifts, bone-tired and aching. But the thought of my daughter sleeping soundly with a full belly kept me going. I gave up little luxuries, new clothes, nights out, even the dream of going back to school myself. Every penny I earned went to food, school supplies, and rent. And when she grew older, I sold my wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry I owned of any value, to pay for her college textbooks. I can still see the jeweler's hands as he weighed it, and the way my heart sank when he handed me the cash. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it helped. I told myself it was worth it, that someday she'd look back and know how much I loved her, that someday she'd say, "Thank you, Mum. You gave me everything." But somewhere along the way, the closeness we once had began to unravel. When she was in high school, she started spending more time with friends than at home. Normal, I told myself. All teenagers need space. But the space kept growing. By the time she went to college, our phone calls turned into quick updates, more about her classes, her friends, her plans, than about us. I didn't mind. I was proud of her. But sometimes, when the phone clicked off, I'd sit in the quiet house and wonder if she missed me at all. Then came adulthood. She got married, had children of her own, and with each passing year, I seemed to move further down her list of priorities. Holidays became optional visits. Calls turned into quick texts. "Busy, Mum. We'll talk later. Can't come. The kids have soccer." I still remember last Thanksgiving. I had spent 2 days cooking, determined to make everything perfect. Her favorite sweet potato casserole, the pecan pie she used to beg for as a little girl. When she arrived, she barely touched the food. She spent most of the evening scrolling through her phone, showing pictures of her kids to everyone else at the table, but barely glancing my way. When I asked her if she'd like to take leftovers, she waved her hand and said, "No thanks, Mum. We'll grab something on the way home." I had stood in the doorway, watching her car drive away, clutching the Tupperware containers I had filled with love and hope. And in that moment, I felt like nothing more than an old obligation she couldn't shake off fast enough. Now, here I was, recovering from surgery, body stitched and soul aching, and the same daughter I gave my life for had told me to call someone else. The bitterness burned deep, but so did the guilt, because as much as her words stung, part of me still defended her. "She's busy," I told myself. "She has her own life, her own children, her own responsibilities. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe I'm the problem." But then another part of me, the quieter part I usually silenced, whispered, "You deserved better. You still do." The nurse peeked in once more, checking the IV line. "You'll feel stronger tomorrow," she said with a kind smile. But all I felt was weaker. Physically, yes, but more so emotionally. As the night fell and the hospital grew quieter, I let the tears come again. Not loud, heaving sobs, but quiet streams that soaked the pillow beneath my cheek. My heart replayed every sacrifice I had made, every moment I had chosen her over myself. And I wondered if she remembered any of it. If she remembered the nights I stayed up sewing her Halloween costumes by hand. If she remembered the mornings I skipped breakfast so she could have lunch money. If she remembered the way I clapped the loudest at her graduation, even though I had to borrow a dress just to look presentable. I wondered, had all those moments faded for her, like old photographs stuffed into a drawer? I didn't know then that someone else, someone I had nearly forgotten, had kept their own photograph of me, a memory I didn't even know mattered. And that memory was about to find its way back to me in the most unexpected way. The night after my daughter's call was long. Hospitals never truly sleep. Machines beeped, doors creaked, nurses padded quietly down the halls. But even with all the noise, I felt suffocated by the silence of my phone. Not a single message. Not a single, "How are you, Mum?" By morning, I had convinced myself to let it go, to swallow the hurt and move on. After all, what else could I do? I was too tired to fight, too weak to demand the love I thought should come freely. That morning, after my vitals were checked and the nurse scribbled something on her clipboard, she disappeared and came back with her hands full. At first, I thought she had the wrong room, but then I saw them. Flowers. Not just a small bouquet, but a large, elegant arrangement of lilies and roses, white and blush pink, carefully tied with a satin ribbon, the kind of arrangement that costs more than I would ever spend on myself. The nurse smiled, placing them on the table by my bed. "These are for you, Mrs. Dorothy." I blinked. "For me? Are you sure?" "Absolutely," she said, and then she handed me a small envelope tucked neatly between the stems. My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, the handwriting neat and deliberate. "Everything is already paid for. Rest easy." No signature, no name, just that short line, like a whisper of reassurance. "Paid for?" I asked, looking up at the nurse. She nodded. "Your meal plan, your upgraded private room, and even some of your post-surgery care. Someone arranged it this morning." I stared at her, stunned. "But who?" She shook her head with a smile. "Anonymous. Sometimes people want to keep their kindness quiet." My chest tightened, but not from pain this time. My eyes filled with tears as I clutched the note. It was so simple. And yet, in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. I couldn't help it. My first thought was my daughter. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe, in her own way, this was her way of saying sorry. But deep down, I knew her too well. If it had been her, the card would have had her name on it. Maybe even a text. "See, Mum? I took care of it." She would have wanted credit. She always wanted credit. So who else could it be? I racked my brain. I hadn't spoken to many people in weeks. My circle had grown small with age. Most of my friends had either passed on, moved away, or were battling their own health troubles. My neighbors were kind, but busy. And family? Well, my only family was my daughter. The flowers stared back at me, full of life and color against the dull beige of the hospital walls. Whoever had sent them hadn't just thrown money at a problem. They had thought about me, chosen something beautiful to brighten the room. They wanted me to know I wasn't forgotten. I reached out, running my fingers along the petals of a rose. It was soft, delicate, yet so alive, and I couldn't stop the sob that broke free. After the sting of rejection, this small act of kindness felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The nurse patted my shoulder gently. "See, someone out there cares very much about you." Her words stuck in my mind. Someone cares. All day I stared at those flowers. Every time I looked at them, I tried to imagine a face. Who would do this for me? And why wouldn't they want me to know? At lunchtime, another nurse wheeled in a tray. My meals were no longer the bland, lukewarm plates I'd been given before. Instead, it was hearty, fresh food. Chicken soup with soft bread, steamed vegetables, fruit slices arranged neatly on the plate. "Compliments of your mystery benefactor," she said with a wink. I laughed, though it came out shaky. Well, they certainly have good taste. That night, as the lights dimmed and the hospital settled, I held the card against my chest. The words replayed in my mind. "Everything is already paid for. Rest easy." I didn't know whether to feel grateful or unsettled. Gratitude, because in my loneliest moment, someone had stepped in. unsettled, because not knowing who it was left me wondering, what did they want in return? Still, I drifted off to sleep with the faint scent of lilies in the air, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. And though I didn't know it yet, the answer to the mystery was closer than I thought. It was someone I hadn't seen in years, someone whose life I had touched in ways I barely remembered. The following morning, I woke to the sound of soft footsteps outside my room. The nurse peeked her head in, carrying her usual clipboard, but this time her expression was different, almost amused. "You have a visitor," she said gently. I blinked in surprise. "A visitor? At this hour?" She nodded. "He came very early, said he didn't want to wake you. He's been waiting down the hall for over half an hour. Would you like me to bring him in?" My heart leapt. For the briefest moment I thought, maybe it's her. Maybe my daughter felt guilty. Maybe she came to see me after all. But the nurse's next words shattered that hope. "It's a man. Not very young. Not very old. He seemed nervous." I frowned. Who could it possibly be? "Send him in," I whispered. The door creaked open, and a tall figure stepped inside. His hair was peppered with grey, his shoulders broad, but slightly stooped with age. He looked at me the way a person looks at something fragile, like one wrong move might break me entirely. "Mrs. Dorothy?" he asked softly, his voice carrying both uncertainty and warmth. "Yes," I said, studying him. "Do I know you?" He smiled faintly, and in that smile I saw it, a shadow of the boy he once was. My memory stirred, pulling me back decades. "Goodness," I whispered. "Samuel?" He nodded, his eyes brightening. "You remember?" Of course I remembered. Samuel had lived down the street when my daughter was little. A quiet boy, often left alone while his parents fought. I used to see him sitting on the curb after school, staring at the pavement, pretending not to hear the shouting from inside his house. One evening, I found him crying in the yard, and I invited him in for dinner. One dinner turned into many. He sat at my table countless nights, eating the same meals I scraped together for my daughter. Sometimes I helped him with homework. Other times, I simply listened. Back then, I thought it was nothing, just kindness, the sort anyone should extend to a lonely child. But clearly, to Samuel, it had been much more. "I can't believe it's you," I said, still stunned. "It's been, what, 40 years?" He chuckled softly. 43. I never forgot you. You were the first person who ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I mattered." Tears welled in my eyes. "Samuel, you didn't have to—" I gestured toward the flowers, the note, the meals. "That was you?" He nodded firmly. "Yes. When I heard you were in the hospital, I knew I had to help. I owed you more than I can ever repay." I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what any neighbor would." "No," he said, his tone sharper now, filled with conviction. "You did what no one else did. You fed me when my own parents forgot. You gave me warmth when my own home was cold. And when I finally found the courage to leave that house, it was because of the strength you gave me." I was speechless. I never imagined those small acts, serving an extra plate of food, offering a kind word, would ripple so far into the future. "I've built a good life now," he continued. "I run my own business. I have a family of my own. And every time I sit at the dinner table, I remember the meals you gave me. You taught me what family really meant. And now, I want to be here for you." The words broke something open inside me. For days, I had been drowning in the sting of my daughter's rejection. And here stood a man who was not my blood, not bound to me by duty, but by gratitude and love. I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling. "Thank you, Samuel. You don't know how much this means to me." He squeezed my hand gently. "Oh, I do. And I'll keep coming back, if you'll let me." "You're not alone, Mrs. Dorothy. Not anymore." For the first time in days, a genuine smile touched my lips. The flowers, the meals, the note, all of it suddenly had a face. And that face belonged to a boy I once helped without expecting anything in return. I leaned back against the pillows, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Life had a strange way of circling back. Where my daughter had failed me, someone I never expected had stepped in. And though it should have hurt, it didn't. Not in that moment. Because maybe the greatest family we have isn't always the one we're born into, but the one we create through kindness. For 2 days, Samuel visited quietly, never overstaying but always making sure I had everything I needed. He brought small comforts too: a crossword, puzzle book, my favorite tea, even a cardigan when he noticed me shivering in the hospital air. The nurses adored him. To them, he was just a devoted nephew or relative. But to me, he was a reminder that compassion doesn't always come from where you expect it. Still, my heart ached with a wound only one person could heal: my daughter. On the third evening, my phone finally rang. Her name flashed across the screen, and for a moment, I almost didn't answer. But the mother in me, stubborn as always, couldn't ignore her. "Hello?" I said softly. Her voice was brisk, casual. "Hey, Mum. Just checking in. How are you managing?" I nearly laughed. Managing? The word stung. She hadn't been there to see me try and reach for the water glass with trembling hands, or watch the nurse cut my food into small pieces so I could swallow without choking. She hadn't seen the nights I stared at the ceiling, whispering prayers into the dark. "I'm recovering," I replied evenly. "Though not because of you." There was a pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" I took a slow breath. "It means that when I called you, when I needed you the most, you told me to call someone else. Do you know how that felt? Lying here after surgery, too weak to move, and hearing my own daughter say she was too busy?" She sighed, the kind of sigh that dripped with annoyance. "Mum, you're being dramatic. I have kids, a husband, a job. My life doesn't revolve around you anymore." Her words were like knives, but I refused to let them pierce me this time. "I know your life doesn't revolve around me. It never had to. But once upon a time, my life revolved around you. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every dream I let go, it was all for you." She laughed, bitter and dismissive. "Oh, here we go again. You always have to remind me about what you did for me." "I didn't ask for that, Mom. You chose it." That cut deeper than I expected. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay steady. "Yes, I chose it, because that's what mothers do. We choose our children over ourselves. We choose to stay up all night sewing costumes. We choose to skip meals so they can eat. We choose to sell the last piece of jewelry we have so they can have books for school. I chose it all. And I'd do it again. But don't you dare tell me it meant nothing." For the first time, she was quiet. I pressed on, my voice trembling now with both pain and strength. "Do you know who's been here for me? Do you know who made sure I had flowers by my bed, warm meals on my tray, my care fully paid for?" Silence again. Then, almost mockingly, she asked, "You mean Samuel? I saw something about him on Facebook. You're telling me he is the one taking care of you?" "Yes," I said firmly. "The boy who used to sit at my table because his parents fought too much to remember he existed. The boy I helped with homework, fed, and treated as family. He's a grown man now, with a family and business of his own. And do you know what he told me? He said he never forgot the kindness I gave him. And when I needed someone, he showed up. I let that hang in the air. Meanwhile, my own daughter told me to order takeout." Her breath caught. "Mum, that's not fair." "No," I interrupted, my voice sharp but steady. "What's not fair is the way you've forgotten me. The way you treat me like I'm an obligation, a burden. I didn't call you to demand money or time. I called you because I wanted my daughter, because I thought love still meant something." For a moment, I thought I heard her sniffle. Or maybe it was just static on the line. Finally, she muttered, I'm sorry, Mum. I just, I can't always be there. I don't need you always, I whispered. I just needed you once, and you weren't there. The line went quiet again before she finally said, I'll, I'll try to visit this weekend. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer clung to her words like a lifeline. I no longer begged for crumbs of her attention, because I had already learned that love, when forced, feels like pity, and I didn't want pity anymore. When the call ended, I sat back against my pillows, my eyes fixed on the flowers Samuel had sent. Their colours glowed in the dim hospital light, a symbol of the truth I had finally accepted. Sometimes strangers become family, and sometimes family becomes strangers. The weekend came and went, and my daughter never showed up. Not even a phone call this time. A part of me had expected it, but still, there was a small sliver of hope inside me that maybe, just maybe, she would keep her word. When that hope withered, I didn't cry. Not like before, because by then, something inside me had already begun to change. Samuel kept his promise. He came every morning, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with fruit, sometimes just to sit with me and talk. His presence filled a space that had been empty for years. He didn't treat me like a burden or an obligation. He treated me like someone who mattered. And that, more than the flowers or the meals, gave me strength. One morning, as I sipped tea he had brought, I caught my reflection in the small mirror across the room. My hair was thin and grey, my face etched with lines of age and worry. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't just see an old woman waiting for others to remember her. I saw someone who had survived, someone who had given love, and now, after all these years, that love was finally circling back. It struck me then. I had been clinging so tightly to the idea that my daughter had to be the one to love me, that I hadn't noticed the other ways love had already found me. The nurses, who stopped by my room even when they weren't assigned, just to check if I needed anything. Samuel, who rearranged his busy schedule to make sure I never ate alone. Even the kind janitor who whistled old tunes when he cleaned my floor, making me smile in the middle of long, lonely nights. They reminded me that family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice, about who shows up when it matters most. After a week, the doctors finally said I was strong enough to go home. Samuel insisted on driving me. I tried to protest. Old habits die hard. But he laughed. You didn't let me walk home alone when I was a kid. You don't get to walk home alone now. When we pulled into my driveway, I felt a mix of relief and dread. The house was the same as I'd left it. Quiet, too quiet, with the faint scent of dust and emptiness. For years, I had waited by this window, hoping my daughter's car would pull up. For years, I had saved recipes, set an extra place at the table, and kept traditions alive that no one came to share. But standing there with Samuel, I realized something. I didn't have to wait anymore. That night, I sat in my favorite chair, wrapped in the cardigan he'd bought me, sipping tea. I thought about my daughter, about all the years I had spent chasing her love. I thought about the sacrifices, the disappointment, the way I kept bending myself just to keep her close. And then I asked myself a question I had never dared to before. What if I stopped? What if I stopped waiting for her to remember me? What if I stopped measuring my worth by her neglect? What if I allowed myself to move forward, even if she never came with me? The thought was terrifying and liberating. I took out a notebook and began to write. Not letters of regret, not pleas for forgiveness, but plans. Plans for myself. I wrote down the things I had always wanted to do but never allowed. Joining the book club at church, planting a small garden in the backyard, even taking that painting class I used to dream about. As the list grew, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't making plans around my daughter's availability. I was making them for me. The next morning, Samuel called to check in. How are you feeling? He asked. Stronger, I said honestly, and not just in my body, in my heart. There was a pause, then his warm laugh. That's the Dorothy I remember? After we hung up, I looked around my little house. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I realized that even if my daughter never walked through that door again, I would be okay. Because kindness had a way of finding its way back, sometimes through the most unexpected people. I had spent so long believing I was invisible, but I wasn't. Not to Samuel, not to the people who chose to see me. And as the days passed, I began to see myself too. You know, I once believed my whole worth depended on whether my daughter remembered me. I thought love had to come from blood, or it wasn't real. But this journey, this surgery, this silence, and this unexpected kindness taught me otherwise. Family isn't always who shares your name. Sometimes it's the boy you once fed, who grows into a man who won't let you face life alone. Sometimes it's the nurse who checks on you after hours, or the neighbor who brings a warm smile. And sometimes it's yourself, finally deciding you matter enough to live fully. So if you've ever felt forgotten by those you gave everything to, remember this. Kindness has a way of finding its way back, often from places you least expect. I'm Dorothy, and this was my story. Now I'd love to hear yours. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And never forget, you are never as invisible as you think.